Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're doing something a little bit different. We're setting out on a profound and, honestly, deeply empathetic journey into an experience that is so heavily stigmatized, so fundamentally misunderstood, and usually just locked away behind closed clinical doors. We're going to explore the actual lived experience of psychosis. We aren't just going to look at it from the outside. We're going to try and understand what it actually feels like to be right there, inside the psychotic mind.
So, to get us started, I want you to imagine a thought experiment. What if the entire world inverted, but you stayed exactly the same? In Roger Zelazny's sci-fi novel Doorways in the Sand, there's this device called a Reminius machine. When you put an object into it, it comes out mirrored, right? Like a right shoe becomes a left shoe. But if you were to step into this machine, you undergo a complete inversion. Your heart beats on the right side, your DNA literally flips. But here's the catch. Because your consciousness and your perception are also inverted, you don't actually feel like you've changed at all.
Instead, you step out of the machine feeling perfectly normal, but reality itself seems to have violently flipped backwards. Cars are driving on the wrong side of the road, doors open the wrong way, the entire world has basically become a terrifying inverted mirror. And you know what? This is the exact sensation of someone experiencing psychosis. They don't wake up feeling like they've gone crazy, not at all. It feels instead like this unspeakable, oppressive change has suddenly blanketed the outside world.
This brilliantly exposes a massive empathy gap we have. As the author Wouter Kusters points out, madness is just like the Reminius machine. In the eyes of the outside world, the madman has changed, but for the madman, the change has taken place in the world itself. You see, outside observers just look at the strange behavior, completely missing the sheer terror and awe of what that person is actually living through.
Section 1. Beyond the Broken Brain. Shifting the Paradigm. Our guide for this explainer is the philosopher Wouter Kusters, who wrote the award-winning book, A Philosophy of Madness. And what makes his perspective so incredibly invaluable is that he isn't just some academic observing this from afar. He's a philosopher who went through 2 severe psychotic episodes himself, one back in 1987 and another 20 years later in 2007. He actually wrote this book specifically to bridge that empathy gap, giving a voice to the real meanings, the desires, and the intense highs and lows of the psychotic experience.
Okay, let's dive into this and contrast the 2 main approaches here. The traditional psychiatric view looks at madness strictly from the outside, focusing entirely on biological mechanics like dopamine levels, brain diseases, aberrant behavior. But the phenomenological view? That focuses on the inside. It centers on the lived experience, the shifting nature of reality itself, and this deep philosophical wonder. Kusters argues, and he's absolutely right, that reducing madness to just a dopamine disruption tells us absolutely nothing about what that mad world actually looks and feels like from the inside.
So this brings us to phenomenological psychiatry. This is the study of how the world, reality, and time actually appear and feel to the person experiencing them, suspending all of our preconceived judgments about what is normal. When we use this approach, we stop treating the mad person's words as mere broken brain signals or gibberish. Instead, we start treating them as what they are, portals into a very real, very intense alternate world.
Section 2. Madness as Lived Philosophy. The Desire for Infinity. So the crucial point here is a concept Kusters calls Psychosis. He coined this term to describe a profound existential confusion of the boundaries between the self and the world, between language and concepts, between finitude and infinity. Think about it for a second. Philosophers debate the nature of reality, solipsism, and the flow of time totally safely in their academic backrooms. But the madman? They experience those abstract philosophical questions as urgent, terrifying, lived reality. The theories break completely out of the textbook and become the entire world. Kusters describes madness as the socially awkward expression of a desire for infinity in a world that defines itself as finite. What a phenomenal quote, right? He connects psychosis to a passionate, almost spiritual longing for cosmic understanding. It's really an attempt to answer the biggest questions of existence. What is life? What is good and evil? Where does time go? But it's happening in this uncontrolled, wildly associative way that just completely overloads the human mind.
Section 3. The Elements of Psychosis, an Inner Journey. Kusters beautifully maps out the progression of a mind dissolving and rebuilding itself, and he does this using the 4 classical elements: earth, water, air, and fire. Now, these aren't just poetic terms. They represent a deeply structured progression of the psychotic experience. It goes all the way from the initial fracture of everyday reality right to the burning intensity of a full-blown delusion. We start with Phase 1 Earth. This is the collapse of everyday realism. Imagine the solid ground of your normal perception just violently fracturing beneath you.
space, and time become terrifyingly distorted. This is where that Rahenius machine effect we talked about first hits. The world loses its foundation, its groundedness, and the person is plunged into a state of sheer existential perplexity.
Then, the mind drifts into phase 2, which is water. Here, the individual completely leaves terra firma. They're swept away into this fluid, overwhelming ocean of mysticism and detachment. Normal language and ordinary images just sort of dissolve. The person might feel a profound, flowing connection to absolutely everything around them, losing the boundaries of their individual self in this vast, silent stream.
Let's see how this builds, because that mist rises right into phase 3, air. Here, the heat of the impending psychosis creates what Kusters calls cloud castles of infinity. This is the ultimate philosophical high, where the mind grapples with abstract fears, absolute nothingness, and total, utter isolation. It's a space of pure, terrifying vastness, where the person feels like they're confronting the absolute zero of existence itself.
And finally, we reach phase 4, fire. This is where those expansive fluid concepts suddenly solidify. It is an absolute pressure cooker environment. The mind, totally desperate to make sense of the overwhelming infinite, crystallizes into intense, often paranoid delusions. This is where you start to see megalomania, complex conspiracies, and the desperate building of grand, systematic plans just to explain the altered universe they're living in.
Section 4. Seeing the crystal. Time, reality, and insight.
And this brilliantly illustrates the climax of the narrative. In the fire of psychosis, the mind becomes like a crystal. It represents complete disintegration, literally a fracturing of reality into a million sharp, mirrored edges. But at the same time, it is the focal point of all psychotic intensity, reflecting and bending the light of human consciousness in ways that normal perception never, ever could.
The philosopher Gilles Deleuze hit the nail on the head here, writing, "We see in the crystal the perpetual foundation of time." The visionary, the seer, is the one who sees in the crystal, and what he sees is the gushing of time as dividing in two, as splitting. In this state, the mad person acts as a seer. They are stripped of all ordinary filters and are staring directly, agonizingly, into the terrifying and awe-inspiring architecture of reality itself.
So what does this all mean? Well, it leaves us with a massive, profound question. If madness is fundamentally a search for meaning, a real desire for infinity, and an unfiltered confrontation with reality, is the boundary between profound philosophical insight and sheer madness merely an illusion of our finite world? It really challenges absolutely everything we think we know about normality. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning everything, and I'll catch you next time.